Life has a way of putting us in the right place at the right time. Sometimes, it isn't coincidence. It's kindness choosing us to carry out a greater purpose. The hospital's fluorescent lights hummed faintly, filling the sterile corridor with a buzz that blended into the silence of late evening. The smell of antiseptic clung to the air, and most visitors had gone home, leaving the halls quieter than usual. At the far end, Eliana Hayes, a woman in her late 20s, stumbled forward with trembling hands clutching her stomach. Her face was pale, beads of sweat dampened her forehead, and every step felt heavier than the last. Eliana had been through battles life never prepared her for. A grueling job that barely paid the bills, an absent family who had long cut ties, and loneliness that weighed more than her body could carry. She had told herself for years that she didn't need anyone, but in this moment, as sharp pain coursed through her body, she knew she couldn't make it alone. Her knees buckled slightly, and she reached for the cool metal railing along the wall. People walked past her quickly, eyes down, pretending not to notice. A nurse pushed a cart across the hall but was called urgently into another room before she could stop. To everyone else, Eliana was just another person lost in the shuffle of hospital life. And then someone noticed. Aiden Cross, a man in his 30s with broad shoulders and steady eyes, had just left his father's ward after another long visit. His father had been battling illness for months, and Aiden knew the weight of fear, the sting of helplessness. He wasn't dressed like a hero, just in a simple gray t-shirt and worn jeans, but kindness rarely comes dressed in capes. It comes in the small, human choice to care. As he rounded the corner, he saw Eliana leaning against the wall, her face twisted in pain. For a split second, he wondered if someone else would help. But then he remembered all the nights he had watched nurses rush past his father's room, too busy to stop, and how much he had wished someone would just see. Without hesitation, he walked over. "Hey, are you all right?" His voice was calm, steady, carrying the kind of warmth that makes a frightened heart feel a little safer. Eliana tried to straighten, embarrassed at her weakness. I'm fine. Just need a minute." But her knees told the truth her words tried to hide. They buckled again, and Aiden caught her before she could fall. His arms wrapped gently around her, steadying her against him. "No, you're not fine," he said firmly, though his tone was gentle. "Let me help." For the first time that night, Eliana allowed herself to lean on someone else. Aiden guided her to a nearby bench in the hallway. "Breathe slowly," he encouraged, crouching in front of her so their eyes met. His were deep brown, full of concern but never pity. She hated pity. What she found in him instead was respect, the kind that sees someone's pain without making them feel small. Eliana swallowed hard. "I didn't want to bother anyone. People have enough to deal with already." Aiden shook his head. "You're not a bother. You're a human being. And right now you matter." Those words hit harder than she expected. You matter. When was the last time anyone had told her that? A nurse finally noticed and came over, helping to assess her condition. Aiden didn't leave her side. He held her bag, answered questions when Eliana's voice faltered, and even cracked a small joke to ease the tension. She found herself smiling through the pain, something she hadn't done in weeks. As the nurse wheeled her toward a nearby room for tests, Eliana turned to Aiden. "You didn't have to stop," she whispered. He walked alongside her, his hand steady on the chair's handle. "Maybe I didn't, but I couldn't live with myself if I didn't." In that moment, kindness wasn't just an act. It was a lifeline. Hours later, after tests and treatment, Eliana found herself lying in a hospital bed, stabilized and no longer in immediate danger. She thought Aiden would have gone home. After all, he was a stranger. Why would he stay? But when she opened her eyes, there he was, sitting in the chair beside her, sipping lukewarm coffee from a paper cup. His jacket draped over the back of the chair, his posture tired but unwavering. "You're still here?" she asked, her voice hoarse. He smiled softly. "I wasn't going to leave you alone. Not tonight." Tears welled in her eyes, not just from relief but from the raw shock of being cared for. People had always left, But this man, who didn't even know her name until hours ago, chose to stay. That night, Eliana realized that kindness isn't measured by grand gestures or lifelong promises. Sometimes, it's found in the quiet decision of a stranger who refuses to walk past. Kindness can open the door, but true help is what walks us through it. Sometimes, a single act of help becomes the turning point in two lives that were never meant to cross, yet needed each other more than they realized. The clock on the hospital wall ticked past midnight, its rhythmic sound breaking the silence of the ward. Eliana Hayes lay still, her body weak but her mind restless. The events of the evening replayed in her thoughts. The pain, the fear, the strangers who passed by, and then Aiden Cross who stopped. She turned her head and saw him again, still in that same chair. His arms were crossed, head tilted back, but his eyes flickered open the moment she moved. Startled her. "You didn't sleep?" Aiden stretched his shoulders. "Dozed a little. Don't worry about me." His words carried the same steady tone as before, but beneath them was something more: dedication. Confused her. Why would he care? Why hadn't he just walked away once the nurses took over? "You don't even know me," she said softly, her voice almost accusing. "Why stay?" Aiden leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. His expression was thoughtful, almost heavy. "Because I know what it feels like to sit in a hospital bed with no one. My father, he's been here for months. Some nights he'd wake up and look around the room, hoping someone would be there. And when he saw me just sitting, even silently, it mattered. That's why I stayed. No one deserves to go through this alone." Eliana blinked rapidly, fighting the sting of tears. She had always told herself she didn't need anyone, but the truth was, she had longed for exactly this, for someone to stay. The nurse returned with paperwork and instructions for her to remain overnight. Eliana struggled to sit up, fumbling for her bag. Before she could lift it, Aiden stepped in, carrying it effortlessly. "Don't strain yourself," he said gently. She sighed. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he replied, "but I want to." That phrase echoed in her chest. "I want to." Not because he was obligated, not because he pitied her, but because he chose to help. The hours rolled on, and Aiden didn't leave. He fetched water when her throat was dry, adjusted the blanket when she shivered, and even convinced a nurse to find an extra pillow to ease her discomfort. Eliana, though hesitant at first, began to let her guard down. In the quiet of the early morning, she whispered, "Why are you so different? Most people, they look away. Even my own family stopped checking in years ago." Aiden thought for a long moment before answering. "Maybe it's because I know what it's like to need someone and not have them. I promised myself that if I ever had the chance, I'd be the person I once needed." Silence lingered, heavy but healing. Eliana turned her face toward him, her voice trembling. "Do you think people can really change? I mean, can someone who's been abandoned, ignored, learn to believe again?" Aiden's eyes softened. "Yes, because belief isn't something you have to earn. It's something that's given. And sometimes, it only takes one person showing up to make the world feel different." For Eliana, those words cracked the walls she had built around herself. Help wasn't just about carrying bags or adjusting blankets. It was about carrying the weight of someone's invisible battles. By dawn, Eliana was cleared for discharge. The nurse explained she'd need rest and follow-up appointments. Aiden stood by the whole time, nodding, listening carefully, making sure nothing was missed. When it was time to leave, Eliana hesitated at the hospital entrance. The city outside was still waking, bathed in the pale light of morning. She clutched her bag tighter, the reality sinking in. "I don't know how to thank you," she admitted. Aiden smiled. "You don't have to. Just take care of yourself." But Eliana shook her head. "No, you've done more for me in one night than some people have in years. I can't just walk away and pretend it never happened." He studied her carefully, sensing the vulnerability in her tone. "Then don't," he said simply. "Don't pretend it didn't matter. Let it change you. That's thanks enough." They walked out together, the crisp morning air carrying a new kind of silence. Not awkward, but filled with unspoken understanding. Eliana's steps were slower, still tender from the pain, and Aiden matched his pace to hers without a word. At the curb, he hailed a cab and helped her inside. As the driver pulled away, Eliana looked out the window, her reflection staring back at her. For the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. She realized that true help isn't about solving every problem. It's about standing in the gap when someone is too weak to stand alone. And that night, Aiden had stood for her. What neither of them knew yet was that this moment wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning. The greatest transformations often begin with the smallest acts of care. Sometimes, what starts as a moment of kindness and help grows into a story that rewrites two broken lives. The weeks after her hospital stay were different for Eliana Hayes. She moved through her tiny apartment with a new awareness of herself, the world, and the weight she had carried for years. She wasn't suddenly free of loneliness or hardship, but something had shifted. Every time she remembered that dim hospital hallway, she didn't just remember the pain. She remembered Aiden Cross, the stranger who didn't walk past, the man who stayed when he didn't have to. His words still echoed, "You matter. No one deserves to go through this alone." For days she thought about how to thank him properly. But how do you repay someone who gives you back a piece of your dignity? Meanwhile, Aiden carried his own quiet transformation. His father's illness weighed heavily on him, and though he spent every evening at the hospital, he often left feeling empty, like the world was closing in. But the night he helped Eliana reminded him of something powerful. Even in pain, there's purpose. One evening, as Aiden left his father's room, he heard someone call his name. Aiden. He turned, surprised. There she was, Eliana. She looked healthier now, her steps steady, though her eyes still carried the softness of someone healing inside. "You're here again," she said, her voice tinged with both gratitude and curiosity. He smiled faintly. "Yeah, my dad's still here. I visit every day." Eliana hesitated, then stepped closer. I've been looking for you. I wanted to thank you properly, not just for helping me that night, but for reminding me that people can care." She paused, her hands fidgeting. "You gave me hope when I had none." Aiden tilted his head, humbled. "You don't need to thank me. Honestly, you helped me too. Reminded me why being here, why showing up matters." The two stood in the hallway, a silence between them that didn't need filling. Sometimes words are too small for the weight of what two hearts understand. Days turned into weeks, and gradually, Eliana and Aiden's paths crossed more often. She began volunteering at the hospital in small ways, delivering books to patients, sitting with those who had no family, bringing coffee for tired nurses. It started as a way to repay what she had received, but soon it became something more. Helping others became her healing. Aiden noticed. "You've changed," he said one afternoon as they sat in the hospital cafeteria. She smiled softly. "No, I've just remembered who I wanted to be before life made me forget." "You reminded me." For Aiden, who had been carrying the burden of his father's illness alone, Eliana became a quiet source of strength. She would sit with him when the nights felt long, reminding him to eat, making him laugh when he thought he'd forgotten how. In turn, he reminded her daily that her life was worth more than the pain she had endured. They weren't rescuing each other. They were walking each other home. One night, Aiden's father grew weaker. Machines beeped softly. Doctors spoke in low tones, and Aiden sat at the bedside, his hands trembling. Eliana stayed too, quietly at his side. She didn't try to offer empty words. She just stayed, her hand resting on his arm. When the inevitable came, and Aiden's father slipped away peacefully, Aiden felt like the ground beneath him gave out. But when he turned, Eliana was there. Her presence didn't erase the pain, but it reminded him he wasn't alone in it. Later, as they walked out of the hospital together, Aiden whispered, "Thank you for staying." Eliana looked at him with tears brimming in her eyes. "Now you know how it feels to not be left alone." Months later, their lives looked nothing like before. Eliana had enrolled in a nursing program, determined to turn her pain into purpose. Aiden, though grieving, found solace in supporting her dreams while slowly rediscovering his own. One evening, as they sat on a park bench watching the sunset paint the sky, Eliana spoke quietly. "That night, when you stopped in the hallway, I thought you were just helping me for a moment. But it became the moment that changed everything." Aiden nodded, his gaze soft. "Sometimes the people we're meant to meet aren't planned. They're placed in front of us, when we need them most." Their story wasn't perfect. Life would still bring struggles, heartbreaks, and storms. But both Eliana and Aiden carried something now they didn't before: the knowledge that transformation is possible when kindness and help intertwine. They had started as strangers, but through kindness, through help, through shared pain, they had become something more, proof that human connection can rebuild even the most broken hearts. CTA. Sparkles, if the story touched you, share it with others. Let's remind the world. Sometimes we don't just change others' lives by helping, we change our own. Never underestimate the power of one moment of kindness.